back for the second edition of the Rewind Roundtable. Myself, Joe Bowen, Paul Hendrick, and we have a very special guest today, the legendary Wendel Clark, who's going to be joining us to break down the Norris Division semifinals between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Detroit Red Wings. We're going all the way back to 1993. We also want to say a big thank you to all of the frontline healthcare workers that are out there to keep us safe, and for everyone that is physically distancing at home. We know this has been a trying time for everybody, but we are going to continue to get through this together. Now, with that said, Wendel, you are in your car right now. You're working technology. How has this been treating you?
I'm learning more new things in the last 10 minutes than I've learned in the last 10 years, technology-wise.
It's a long way from Kelvington when you had the party line.
We had the party line, and I was never allowed inside. No school. You think we could come home and stay at home? They'd be keeping us outside. You can't go in the house.
Oh, that was social distancing in the old days.
That's why I'm in the truck. I'm social distancing from the family right now. It's been 6 weeks.
And you're not downtown anymore? Where are you?
Yeah, well, usually about this time of the year, we move up to the cottage or our house up there. I'm like 6 months in each spot, so we're up north where we can house everybody easier than in a condo.
We've been having a lot of fun. We've been going into the memory bank, rewinding back to 1993. In our last episode, we were talking about Game 3, coming back home to Maple Leafs Gardens, being down 2-0 in that series to the Wings. What was your recollection going into that series? I mean, despite the fact that you were so close in the standings with the Wings, it was almost like this David and Goliath scenario. Did you perceive yourselves to be the underdogs?
Yeah, no, I think we were the underdogs in the series. Detroit had a good season. I think they may have had one of the most points since, entering into the 2000s, and they had a strong season as well, and been in the playoffs, and we really hadn't been a good playoff run until probably 87 or something like that. We were maybe 89, we were in the playoffs, but so we were new to it with a whole new group of lineup of guys, a lot of new faces from 91 to 92, 93 that Cliff put together, and we'd come together there probably starting really right after Christmas.
Wendel, the biggest new face didn't put skates on. I stood behind the bench. Tell us a little bit about what the impact that Pat Burns had on this group, and tell us a little bit about how he approached the series with Detroit, and then maybe also what happened, what was his approach after losing the first 2 games in Detroit?
Well, really, when Pat got there, he was a guy that didn't pull any punches. It was his way or the highway, and he was really a whole new fresh face in the dressing room the start of the year, and he took it on a part of all of us and telling us what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And, we really had the number one line is in with whoever was playing with Dougie was on the number one line, and everybody else played the same way. You put a checking line together, but really taught us and made us come together as a team. We really were strongest as a 20-man unit with a leader being Dougie with that talented of a player. And then with that, the more we won, the more confidence we got. And then entering the playoffs, we were basically all set. And I remember, y'all had those individual meetings. And I remember my meeting with Burnsy was, there's no fighting. You're not fighting Probert or nothing that goes on. We're staying out of all that. And after that first 2 games, I was in a lot of heat with the media and everybody else because we were losing badly, but I wasn't doing anything, or I don't even think Bomber was in a fight, or we didn't have anything going, but Burnsy didn't want that. And so we took a lot of heat there after the first couple games. Until we played Game 3 and turned it around. And then coming back into Game 3, it was, okay, guys, we're down 2, and it's just play our game. We really, I think, kind of settled down after Game 2 and said, stop trying it just because it's the playoffs. Just play our game that we did probably the last couple months of the season, and that made us play a lot better. And, the games we won were close, and the games we lost in that series, we were really bad.
Wendel, you mentioned some of the marquee names, but some of the names that stood out for me as well, especially in Game 4, Kent Mandeville, Rob Pearson. There was size with both those players, but so many of those individuals beyond the top group of you certainly contributed to the victory. How important as a teammate were players like Foligno, Pearson, Manderville in terms of what this team was able to accomplish?
Well, that was that team in 92, 93, probably more than any team I played on. It was a team effort. You had your best players, Dougie doing what he did, and Dave Hendrick scoring 50, and guys doing things. But really, as a team, everybody bought into what their game plan was that Burnsy had for us. Everybody accepted their role. And you really give it to guys. Ken Vanderbilt, a young guy coming in and just playing and learning at the same time as he was playing. Robbie Pearson was doing the same thing. Those guys came from being offensive guys at their previous years at junior or college, and now you're in defensive roles. Mike Foligno, probably one of the greatest leaders, come in, was the main guy from the team he was on and captain and everything, and now he's in and out of the lineup as a role player, and nobody accepted it more than he did. And guys, that you could just feel everybody accepting their role and whatever time they were given, whether it was a 3 minutes of ice time or the healthy scratch or your 25-minute guy. The guys really bought into their roles.
The first two games in Detroit, they got off to the good starts. The Leafs, I think, if I'm not mistaken, were 33-8-1 during the regular season when you scored first. And this team, and we talked about this before Game 3, about how good defensively they were, the defense core. Maybe not a Norris Division Trophy winner, but Burnsy said that he thought that of the core, it was the best in the National Hockey League. But scoring first was an important aspect, and you did score first in Game 3.
Yeah, no, we always played with such confidence. Once everybody started playing Burnsy's system, how he played it, and our defense really, we had 6D on a consistent basis. We had really good depth on defense where everybody could play Burnsy's role that he wanted very well. And they were kind of unheralded how good they were as a group on defense, all of them. And all of them really in their prime of playing, too. They've all had a few years under their belt and experience, and all of them could play with an edge. Come playoff time, each guy had his own way of playing with a little bit of an edge come playoff time. And if we got a goal lead in a game, and especially come playoff time, us as a team were really comfortable in playing the hockey game and to play the style. And really, if I think we were always coached, if you were on, I can just remember if I was playing with Dougie's line, you had the free reign to do a lot of fancy stuff. If I wasn't playing with Dougie, it was you dump and chase and you play this way, and or you don't play it. It didn't matter. And really, he knew the way he coached. He knew that Dougie's line was going to get 2 goals a game minimum, and the other lines, they don't allow a goal. We win 2-0. And really, we got so much confidence as a line that everybody played so well defensively.
I mean, from an outside perspective, looking back on this series, it really felt as though you had the weight of the world on your shoulders, Wendel. And to score that goal, to go up 3-1 in Game 3, was that kind of getting the monkey off of your back where you could really unleash and kind of quiet some of those naysayers?
You do, but it wasn't really necessarily the goal as much as it was as a team win, because it was never really played all the time. That season, 92, 93, I was really third line role. Dougie would be on the number 1 line, and then I didn't start playing with Dougie a lot until playoffs, and that's when Dougie upped his ice time by playing on the first line and the third line, being centerman on both lines, and really, so just got the confidence, and definitely would have helped get the monkey off the back a bit. Whenever you're scoring goals, it's a funner part. It makes it lighter on you, so it helps. But really, the team winning was the biggest thing. Was able to get that first game win at home.
Wendel, Nicky Borashevsky gets hurt in Game 1, and mercifully, he's able to come back and play in Game 7, or we may not be doing this show right now. But he played on that line with Gilmore and Andrechuk a lot. But when he was injured for Games 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, what was it like on the bench? When did you know you're playing with Dougie this shift, or what the lines were? Because a lot of time, other than the Berg, Osborne, and Cecil line, it looked like there were names being drawn out of the hat a lot of times.
Well, actually, there really was. You never really knew where anyone was going. Burnsy was just coaching by the seat of his pants. We had the checking line was really put together for the second half of the season and the playoffs, so we knew that line. And Dougie and Chucky were always together in one line, and when Nick was there, he was part of that. But then once Nick went down, there was really parts coming everywhere, where sometimes I'd be going up or playing the power play with Chucky and Dougie, or then it'd be maybe Eastie and myself with Robbie Pearson, and then Eastie would be sitting on the bench, and Dougie would jump in and play center on the third line, and then you get Mike Foligno would pop in there, and now all of a sudden Glenn Anderson would be in there as well. So he was doing so much juggling just to try to find ways and throw different things at it. That's why I always say it was such a team effort where everybody bought in, because everybody was coming in and out of the lineup at different stages on different lines. You don't know. You may start the game on the first line and end it on the fourth. And really, as a team, everybody bought in. Everybody really backed each other. And if you might have been sour that you were up and down the lineup, but nobody showed it.
You talked about the penalties in the first couple of games. I think it was 126 in the second game, but both teams found a fine way of playing between commotion and chaos and control. And I think in that second period, Paul Coffey's just scored. Glenn Anderson comes in and hammers Constantine off. And moments later, you stand Bob Colbert up at center ice and put him on his backside. And then the team responded from there. How difficult was it to find that edge of physicality, stay out of the box, given how difficult that Detroit power play was back in 1993?
Well, it really is. That team was full of talent, and you didn't want to take dumb penalties, but yet you had to play with an edge, because your advantage is playing against that team with an edge, because they played finesse, and we had an edge as a team, everybody. And really, especially probably in playoffs forever, not just that year, but every year in the playoffs, that first round, you don't know, the players are getting a sense of where the referees are calling the games in the series and how playoffs is going to go. So it's once the players find it, and that usually comes end of game 2 into game 3. Okay, here's how the game's going to get called. So this is what we got to do. And the games get more physical, more intense. And, Andy being, probably the biggest playoff veteran that we had, and how to play in the playoffs and big games, nobody's done it better than he has. So I think he was a little bit of a leader there in knowing how he played, because he was such a skill guy, but he had an edge and could be very mean in a lot of ways in trying to win.
It was such a great time to be a Toronto sports fan. The Blue Jays were the reigning World Series champions. Of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs being in the postseason. How do you recall the vibe being like in the city? What was it like for you going out into the streets? Did you kind of isolate yourself at that time, or did you kind of just live your day-to-day life?
No, we pretty much you're the same. The city's never been different, probably since when they were winning the Cup in the 60s to when we had runs in the 80s to the way it is today. The people and fans have always been around. You couldn't, you couldn't get into the Gardens without walking in the playoffs, without walking through a couple thousand people that were lined up around the building in the morning to get in to see the game, and you had to go in for the morning skate. I think Dougie lived next door, and he used to put a hat and glasses and his own Gilmore jersey and pretended he was a super fan to walk through to get in the building. So it was just a fun time. The Jays were playing well. And it's a fun time to be in the city when the city's having that much fun as fans, just because of the sporting world in the city was doing so well at the time. Us in the playoffs, the Jays winning. So it was a fun time to be in the city.
Wendel, every good team goes through a situation where there's a couple of key things that happen along the way. One of the biggest things that happened along the way in this season was the decision by Cliff Fletcher and Pat Burns that Felix Potvin was capable and he was ready to be anointed the number 1 goaltender. And to that end, Grant Fuhrer is traded to Buffalo and Dave Andreychuk arrives. And so 2 huge pieces are being put together for this team. Andreychuk, a known commodity. He was going to be on Gilmore's flank and he was going to score. How did the room look down at the other end of the room and see young Felix Potvin putting on the goaltending equipment and being anointed the number 1 guy?
Well, he took it and you'd never guess it. Felix, especially because he was a real young guy to begin with, and just coming up and very quiet, speaking basically one language and not English when he got there. So but his play on the ice was like a 27-year-old when he got in the net, and he just played with such poise and confidence that really I think our defense were settled down and calm playing in front of him. The team was confident, and really that's to Felix's credit as he come in with such poise. He didn't look like a 20-year-old. He didn't look scared. When he got his equipment on, he looked much different standing in the crease in the middle of a hockey game than he did if you walked in and did the interview with him in his underwear there. He looked like a little 19-year-old kid. But when he got on the ice, he played with such confidence that fed the whole team, I think, just seeing how well he played and how he carried himself.
I want just a follow-up question, if I can, guys. In game 2 and the first 2 games, Dino Ciccarelli was parked in front of the net, and there was a lot of commotion going on there. And at the end of game 2, Felix got into it with him a little bit, throwing a bit of a punch. We didn't realize Felix could fight until a couple of years later when Ron Hextall came down from the other end of the rink and found out that this kid could fight pretty well. But having said that, and we've talked about this last week when we were talking about game 3, getting back to Toronto, Pat Burns simply told the defense, leave him alone, Ciccarelli that being, and Felix obviously had to buy into that as well. And so they fronted him instead of being embattled with him in front of the net.
Yeah, no, it's instead of, basically a lot of the coaching from that time on really started to change, and a little more of what it is today that Pat started this. Instead of trying to move the guys in front of the net, just make sure you got the stick. Make sure you're aware. Make sure you're ready to win the battle when the puck gets there, rather than being tied up the whole time. Because Dino was really good at that. You don't score 600 goals and not know what you're doing in front of the net. And so really Pat just wanted the guys to calm down and play the game in front of Felix and let Felix worry about trying to find the puck. Because if you get a defenseman battling with the guy in front, really that's what the guy in front wants, because now he's got 2 guys screening the goalie trying to do something. And that really settled it down for our guys. And, all of a sudden now you're blocking shots before they get to the net and stuff.
Good thing Tim Chivalday didn't take his equipment or his glove off there in game 2, or he'd have found out that Felix could fight.
No, that was it. I remember that game in Philadelphia. I was at the far end. I was skating. Geez, I don't know if Felix can fight. I better get down there, and because that was hexy. By the time I got there, Felix was on the upper end. I said, he doesn't need any help. I'm going to the bench.
What was the liaison like with the assistant coaches, the 2 Mikes and Murph and Kitch, and how they complemented what Burnsy was able to do? What do you recall from the 2 assistant coaches and how important a role they played with this team, especially as a liaison with the players?
Well, they were probably key. Burnsy is a tough guy, a tough cop, as we want to call it. And he knew that, and he used that persona, and he played heavy-handed a lot of times with our team. And so a lot of times Murph and Kitch would be walking in, and they're explaining what Pat's trying to get at. They're calming the guys down. They were great assistant coach as far as all the communication was going on during the season or with Pat, because they had the feel of the dressing room. They knew the players very well. There'll be a lot of times I'd probably in the middle of the season, I'm going to lose it on Pat because of what he's doing, and then I'd have a chit-chat with Kitch. And so in other words, I'm venting on Kitch, and Kitch just all of a sudden takes 5% of that back to Pat, because he knows if he took 100%, I'd be in real trouble. So that's where the really good assistant coaches know how to feel the temperature of the players and just be a release. And sometimes there's something that they can take back to the coach. Oh, yeah, the player made sense in what he was saying. And then they can lobby on behalf of the player. And that's where they really were like good cop, bad cop, very good in handling the dressing room when Pat wasn't there, because Pat come and straightened out a lot of things, but that's the way Pat coaches. He's a very intense guy, and he knows that, and so he had great quality guys in Kitch and Murph with him.
The superstars are always going to steal the headlines. There were a total of 9 future Hall of Famers between the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Red Wings. But in your mind, who is maybe the unsung hero of the Toronto Maple Leafs, or someone who was underrated?
I don't know. I think a lot of these, I always go back to our defense. I think as a whole, they didn't always get a lot of credit because we were a good defensive hockey club under Burnsy, and Felix would get the credit, and then Dougie always got credit because you're scoring 150 points, so that's a definite. But our defense as a whole, whether it be Todd Gill and Dave Ellett or McCown and Lefebvre or Rouser and all the guys, they just all played so well together and did their roles so well. And guys played so much tougher in the playoffs. There was a real difference in our team, especially on the defense, is what a regular season, what they looked like. And then come playoff time, they were a nasty group of 6 guys to play against and very hard to play against for the other team.
Wendel, I had to ride a bus with Mike Foligno for almost 4 years while he was with the Sudbury Wolves. And the man was an insomniac, and he was he was perpetual motion. He was doing something to someone all the time. I'm sure he had to mature a little bit, but tell us a little bit about some of the characters maybe that we don't know about. What was Todd Gill like off the ice, or Mike Foligno and these people? Because the team had a lot of character, but they also had a lot of characters.
Yeah, no, everybody had their own time or had their own space or airtime in the dressing room. Mike Foligno, like I said, he came over as a leader, captain of Buffalo Sabres, and then he's a role player with our team. And like you said, Joe, he has so much energy. And you're in the middle of game 6 or 7 and the intensity level, and here's this guy still joking around, having fun in the dressing room. And if it wasn't for the experience of knowing how Mike could play, you'd go, what is he doing fooling around in front of the – but he lightened the room up with his honest energy and excitement and being ready to play. He was like a kid, and he was 15 years in the league. And the intensity of a guy like Todd Gill, there's a guy 178 pounds soaking wet and probably the toughest pound-for-pound guy, how he wore his heart on his sleeve and how he played and what he had to do. And, you had Kenny Baumgartner in and out of the lineup, team tough guy, Mr. Positive in all the roles. And there's a guy that's your one of the league heavyweights, and he's probably the dressing room scholar at the same time, which doesn't go hand in hand. And so, you had all these different guys all the time. Dave Hendrick, just a quiet, skilled guy. Nobody is going to get along better with everybody than Dave Hendrick. He was one of those guys in the dressing room that was a glue piece. He'd come on, and him and Dougie just flourished together, how both their skill sets went together, but then how he carried himself with everybody, being a big man in the game. You can see why he lasted so long and became a captain and a leader with that team that won the Cup in Tampa. He was a real glue guy that kept guys together and didn't do it by talking. Just his mannerisms and his personality made him such a good guy.
When fans are watching back this game in this series, Wendel, what do you think that people should be keeping their eyes on this time around?
I just think you maybe seen in game 2, we didn't play well, but all the little nastiness things that goes on in that era of hockey, and people trying to get an edge, extra holding, extra hooking, a little shot in the back of the leg, a little shot in the back, all the little things that players did to try to get an angle. And it was all done in this series, and guys would, that was the back in the day when it was a one-referee system. So there was lots of things that were going on behind the play that the camera's not catching and would have been a penalty, but nobody's seen it. The ref didn't see it. There's no camera work. There's no getting suspended later if the ref didn't see it. So it was a lot of stuff that happened in playoff hockey was going on behind the scenes. If you're watching the game now, is what would you call a penalty? Oh, that's a penalty, and oh, that's a penalty. But that was just the intensity, and that was part of the game. It wasn't out of the ordinary. That was just how intense the game was.
Steve Chason gets chased in the second, called on boarding on Doug. They're down to 5 defensemen. What's the mood inside that dressing room, tied up at 2-2 after 2 periods of play, knowing damn well you don't want to go back to Joe Louis Arena 2 nights later, down 3-1? Was there a quiet sense of confidence that you could get the job done? And eventually we saw it done with Dave Hendrick scoring in the next period.
Yeah, anytime we were at home, we had such confidence playing at home. We loved I think playing at home more than anything. Burnsy had us always playing that if we were tied going into the third, we're at home. It was a special place to be, and the guys always seemed to step up. Somebody was going to step up and make it, and we knew the confidence that we had playing defensively. And if we just kept our game style, the team really had a confidence. By the end of the night, if we play our style, we can beat anybody.
Well, Wendel, we are going to let you go, but before we do, have you ever watched this series back? Are you that type of player that likes to watch old games, or do you just kind of leave it where it was?
No, I pretty much leave it where it is. I forget about a lot of things, but when the games are on, you'll catch pieces of it, and then you'll catch yourself watching more and more of the game. But and it's funny with players, you don't remember the game like a fan does, but as soon as you see a part of the game, the whole game comes back to you. What you couldn't remember before you watched it, and then it's almost like that old VHS machine in your brain starts going back, and you remember the game again. But it's always fun. And then the great thing for us old guys watching the game is you're remembering the characters that you played with, whether it be Dave Ellitz or Todd Gills or Felix, and all the other stories about having great teammates come back to you.
Well, like I said, thank you so much for doing this. It's been so great to get some insight. We could talk for hours with you, getting all of these stories. So you guys can catch this game tonight, 7 o'clock on Sportsnet. And be sure to join us on Saturday. We're going to be reliving Game 5 from that Norris Division semifinals. And we're going to have a special guest, Polino, joining us. Thank you again, Wendel. On behalf of Joe Bowen and Paul Hendrick, I'm Danielle Emanuele, and we will see you next time.